talked a little bit about Army. We talked a little bit about discipline. Discipline, important thing. Now let's talk about the police force, because I've noticed everyone has an opinion on the police force.
These days.
I am sure you have some opinions, some good, maybe some bad. Just tell us a little bit about your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've seen everything. So when I say I've seen everything, I've seen, death from many different angles, thousands of people, bodies. I've seen officers do good things. I've seen officers do poor things. I've seen great things that officers did, and then the media covers it and makes it look horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen everything. So most of what I've seen, it's been, challenging to swallow, especially to take home to your wife and your children, but you have to tell them a certain limited amount, right,
Mm-hmm.
to control what you release, because what you see, even some of the things you experience, I won't go into gross details, but like when I get home, my wife wants to hug me and I'm like, don't touch me. I'm going to take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone. I'm taking off my stuff and throwing it right in the wash, and we're going to wash it, and then we'll talk when I get out of the shower.
Yeah. And how long were you in the police force before?
26 years.
26 years. It's a good.
26.
Yes.
Same police department?
Yes, same. Charlotte. So I've seen everything. Some crashes of airplanes at the Charlotte airport.
You're kidding.
Yes.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Sorry, I'm not prepared for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, lots of other things. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's awful. So when I say I've seen thousands, it's been literally too many. I'd rather see less, but you can't control that. You see it and you can't take it back.
Right.
Do you feel like you've seen more, was it harder being on the police force than it was like being in the Army, or was it kind of just different in its own way?
It's a different thing because you're not training for active war. You're supposed to be in a civilized society.
I was going to say, you're dealing with civilians around you. That's got to feel
supposed to be, right? But then the problem is not everybody knows that. Not everybody in their actions know that. When you're getting shot at, when there's people that are committing crimes, and then we have that constant problem nowadays with us that we take and arrest somebody for a felon, and you just pick the felon. We arrest them for it, and then later that evening, before we're even done with the paperwork or the case, they're back out again.
And how does that happen? Like what's going on there? Like, explain it to us.
The last number I heard was back in 2016 of there being 12,000 felons a year that we arrest in Mecklenburg County.
Mm-hmm.
And now that 12,000 felons, without chasing numbers around, we can take to court with a judge and a jury 50 felony trials in a year.
That's insane.
You can't fix that. That's where the family, we go back, we were talking about the family, that's where the family has to stay the family, or without the family, there is no way to fix that gap. You can't, if you doubled the funds for the courts and you double the courts, you're going to get 50 and 50, so you'll have 100 trials. That's going to put a real big Band-Aid on it, right? This is only something that the people of the United States can change. And seeing that this is not a Charlotte problem, it is a city problem of every city that's big in America. And they cannot handle the crime that people do without the structure of the family, the structure of a husband and wife, a structure of children being raised. We as a nation can't even prosper unless we have a certain amount of children that are brought into this world that are alive, that live, that are raised, right? We can't continue as a nation. Without that, even China, if you look at China, they've even changed their plan from allowing one child to trying to promote having more than one child because they cannot exist.
Yeah, they figured that out way too late. That was if they could have world domination if they hadn't had the one-child policy.
Right.
Because of that policy, I don't think that they'll be able to do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, I forget what they're at now. They went past 2 child. They allow more than 2. I just can't remember if it's 3 or 4 at this point, but
yeah,
well,
but back to
they're at such a drama where they've been not having children for so long that people are habitually used to not having children around. So now that the government's telling them that they can have children, they're not functioning like they can have children.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And we're only getting that. I'm only sharing that as I hear the news. I'm not, I don't live over there or experience that firsthand. But I do see what's happening here in America. And only to be fair, there is an answer, and it's not through the government. It's not through local government or police or anything. It's stuck with us. So if people are hearers, they need to be doers, right? So if you're listening and you hear, then your job is to be a doer.
Yeah.
And that's how we correct the problem.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Did you ever find it difficult yourself coming out of military, or were there other men and women in the force that had a difficult time with the mental shift between being essentially in enemy war zones or enemy territory and then coming back and then working in a civilian environment? I imagine that's got to be quite the mental shift that not everybody is technically a threat. Right.
We have to carry a weapon and use pepper spray versus hand grenades.
Yeah.
That's a shift.
A little different.
A little different, right?
It's a pretty big shift.
I'm like, I'd rather give them back the pepper spray and use hand grenades in some instances, right? I mean, because you're literally on the streets, and the streets at sometimes are like a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially with Charlotte, I mean,
right. If you and people can't even imagine if they, the reporters that over the years that rode with us were scared, seeing the things that we saw. Most people would stay in the car. They would not get out of the car. If they're smart, they wouldn't get out of the car. At least the car gives you that protection, because things go south quick. Things go very difficult, very fast, and the car only gives you transportation out of that situation.
Right? Yeah. Well, now I want to get your opinion on this, and this was a hot topic in 2020, where they're saying, what we need to do to fix injustice is we need to slash police budget, or in a more social media friendly slogan, we need to defund the police. What was your reaction to that?
Well, in 2020, I was retired. So my reaction, it goes back from my history. And I would say that my history with Charlotte is that the city council has not paid the police department what they need to be paid. And we all know that. That's any public service, like teachers, medics, firemen are not given a pay raise. They're the last ones. They get promises, but they don't get pay raises. And so if we want professionals, we have to pay for professionals.
Yeah.
And if you want control, you have to pay for patrol. One thing I like to remind people about is I don't call a plumber to fix my electrical problem.
Right.
Yeah.
I call the person that's a professional to fix the problem. And we have to realize that we can't have politicians telling police how to do their job. Police know how to do their job. They should have accountability on how to do that.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
But they shouldn't be told how to do their job. We have laws that are written on the books for a long time. We're not ignorant of that. And we enforce the laws of the jurisdiction that we're in. And those laws are for the good of everybody. They're not for the harm of anybody. No one has anything to be afraid of in America. You have things to be afraid of in Mexico from the police, but not in America.
So I'll play devil's advocate then. What would you say to the people that say that the police as a whole, and again, I understand it's a broad statement, but the police as a whole is racist against blacks and African Americans?
Those people are racist.
Explain.
Because it doesn't matter about color. They're racist towards police. So they think that they can lump police all in one category, just like they would say, me as a white man, if I said all black people are evil, that would be racist. That would be wrong. I can't say that. There's white people that are bad. There's black people that are bad. We all know that, right? But it's not fair to categorize all of them as bad. Even professionals knows there's good plumbers and there's bad plumbers, right?
Yeah. You want the good plumber, don't you?
Yeah, there's problems everywhere. We all know that. We've been talking about some of those problems here. We all have our own problems. That's why it's my job to focus on mine. And if someone else finds that they're focusing on my problems, they're not focusing on their problem. Right. And they can't fix my problem. Only I can do that. I'll worry about mine. You worry about yours.
Yeah.
Right. And it's real easy that way. If we admit that we are human and that we have errors to work on, then we can work on them. But if we're trying to always look at other people and say, what is their problem? Then that's where you have the failures at. But let the professionals do what the professionals do.
Yeah. No,
right?
I would tend to agree with that.
So I've voiced this concern a couple of times with Jordan on this podcast, that over the past couple of years, it's seemed to have accelerated the instances that are being reported. Now that could be the media just paying more attention to stories of potential police brutality or actual or just framing a story. But either way, they're paying more attention to interactions between police and civilians. And it does seem that there has been an increase in police that are going outside the bounds that they're permitted to treat people with. We have a video here that we'll show. Actually, right now would probably be a good time, because this one I'm having a much harder time with. But we'll go ahead and just watch this one real quick here. Should be able to hear it in the headphones as well. But for context, with this guy, he came out bad talking the police and pushed one of them from behind. So he started the assault for sure. Now, wasn't smart because it was 3 officers, but now the 3 officers have got him pinned to the ground, and this is how it continues. So it was Arkansas.
Is that it?
Yeah, it's just playing over as we saw before. They're just rerunning.
Okay, I think that's enough, Connor.
Mm-hmm.
So really my summary of that is, first of all, if you're not in law enforcement, your job is not to make a decision or a accusation, especially if you're a politician.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you're in law enforcement, we look at that and we say, that looks bad,
Yeah.
right? But there's always an answer. Let the officials of Arkansas worry about Arkansas. Let the law enforcement officers that were involved with that or over that organization work on that disciplinary problem, if there is one. But you need to understand all this. If there is resisting arrest, there was a crime committed and you're resisting arrest, police are authorized to use whatever force is necessary to effect an arrest, up to deadly force. That's the highest force you can use. Deadly force. You can't use much higher. If you die, there's no need for it. So resisting arrest should not happen. It is obviously going to happen, but it shouldn't happen. And that's where you get the overage of use of force like that, when people continually, even with them on the ground, because he's obviously, from their attention, not handcuffed. It looks like it. He's still fighting, not submitting to the arrest. He's not trying to comply with the arrest. And then you have to add the officer's personal experience with that person. How many times has he been arrested before? What is his demeanor? What is his reputation? We're all taught that in law. Like, if you know this person and you've had repeated dealings with them and you have to use force every time, you know that if you're a fighter or you're a boxer, you know you go fight this person again. He's watched your fight last time. She's watched your fight last time. They're going to get better. They're going to improve. They're going to try different tactics. You have to keep up with that. And those are things that we have to understand, that police are authorized to make strikes like that. You know, sometimes it gets worse.
Even the blows to the back of the head there?
You're authorized to get effective arrest. As a blow to the head, is that going to hurt somebody?
Back of the head.
The back of the head.
Yes.
Does it kill somebody?
Can.
It hurts. It hurts, but you have to see, like, really what are the details behind that. So I'm just saying from our office interview, first of all, Monday morning quarterback, not permitted, right? Especially if you don't have a profession in law enforcement, keep it within your profession. We all can agree here that looks bad, right?
Right.
We all feel that looks bad. But we weren't there. We don't know all the details. We have to wait until we know all the details. And that's one thing you learn as a police officer. One thing I'm not going to criticize is another police officer's actions, whether they were good or bad, until I'm in that officer's shoes and understand what that officer says he or she is a part of, witnesses, experiences. Then we can make a determination, because the law's written, even for us law enforcement officers here in North Carolina, this is up to the personal law enforcement officer's experience of what they have experienced with one person or 100 people or 1,000 people or this particular person over and over and over. And that experience has to be brought out in court. Mm-hmm. And that's where that has to go. If it's got to go that route, to court, to a law body that can handle that, right? Not for us to sit here and basically, especially as a politician, to say that was wrong and we need to have their jobs. That's not fair, because they're not professionals like that in that regard. Stick to making laws and not enforcing them.
I guess watching that one, where I have a hard time with it is after taking the concealed carry class, is that we understand that in a situation where you are outnumbered or outgunned or somebody else has a lethal weapon, that you do have the ability at that point under the law to protect yourself. Now, if the gentleman was resisting arrest and fighting the officers back, I can understand where it was at. I still have trepidations that it was 3 of them and he was to the ground, so he's definitely on the losing end of it. Mm-hmm. If he was not resisting arrest, and at this point he's just trying to cover himself from getting hit repeatedly, hit and kicked from 2 of the 3 officers, I think that's kind of where I got a little bit iffy, because now if it was me in those shoes, and I didn't do anything to provoke the officers, but a misconception, something happens, and now I have 3 of them on me, and I find myself in that similar situation. Personally, I don't know what to do in that scenario. Mm-hmm. I don't want to pull a gun on an officer.
Right.
But at the same time, my life is now my life is now in danger. And the reason that I bring it up, because since the riots happened and since COVID happened, I think a lot of good officers have left the force at this point. And I feel like I'm seeing an increase in these, that I used to look at them and I feel like I could wait a day or two and I get the information as like, yeah, no, the media is framing this one. And I feel now I get more and more that it doesn't seem to be like it's getting as much of a framing. So I have this feeling that there is an increase in officers who do not have their emotions under control, do not have the training, and clearly are not getting the funding for the training to get them to that point. Right. So as I see an increase in police officers that I would say, I don't want to call them bad, but maybe misguided is better. I mean, there certainly are bad ones. We've established that. Mm-hmm. The concerns that, because I didn't want to get a vaccine, or I didn't want to shut my business down, because we saw plenty of that. We saw plenty of cops completely comply with legislators who had no business telling people what they should do medically or not. And they went and shut people's businesses down. They threw them in jail. All of a sudden, the law became the heavy hand of the government, who was, as far as I think a lot of us here are concerned, was not in the right for how they were enforcing that stuff. So I think as a civilian, those scenarios kind of play out in my head, that my chances of running into an officer who has a bad attitude, who has a lack of training and a lack of self-control, that there are those of us who could run into them more often. And I wanted to ask you, as a former law enforcement, what can we do if we find ourselves in those situations where it seems like nothing we do is getting this cop to let the situation de-escalate? And they keep pushing it, trying to get a rise out of you. What is the best thing for a civilian to do to not only for them to leave that situation unscathed, but the officer as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the basic formula for success for everybody is, whether you're arrested illegally or legally, submit to the arrest. Mm-hmm. Fighting is not the answer. So if you submit to the arrest and then you're going to court, if it was something that you didn't do, you have nothing to worry about. But if it's something that you did, you have to worry about it in court. Mm-hmm. And if there was no resisting, there would be no fighting. If we all could not watch that video, but be there on the scene to watch that actually happen,
right?
Then, and to you to hear what's going on with the officers communicating, to you to feel the intensity of that situation, and I know what they were in, mm-hmm. And to know what their experience is there, that's really huge to be able to make a better, accurate decision, besides what the media is going to obviously show you. And I used to have faith in the media, but that stopped back in 1992 when I became a police officer. Mm. then I saw what the media does to all of our reports. Like once in Charlotte, they said Charlotte police shot a man in the back, and we shot a man in the back. But the man was running with shooting over his shoulder to shoot at police, and we had no choice but to shoot him in the back. Then they said they didn't find a gun. The guy didn't have a gun. Those were lies. The guy had a gun. That came out in court. So don't trust what the media is going to tell you. The media is not going to tell you the truth. And so they only show you a portion of that. What did he do before the video? What did he do after the video? We don't know. Does it look bad? It absolutely looks bad, right? But do we know everything? We only know it looks bad. We don't know all the things.
Yeah, as of right now, we only have the written context. I imagine they pulled gas station security footage, and we'll see. And like I said, he did, according to the officers, he did start it.
Right.
So that's certainly one to keep an eye on. And I think in concealed carry training, we talked about, I cannot remember the officer's name, but where she reached for her taser.
Right,
but
Kim
she pulled
Potter,
her pistol instead and ended up shooting somebody. I think that goes back to the budget cuts and a lack of training. What type of training do police have to undergo after they've qualified?
Right. Well, it's hard. Police officers are required in North Carolina to shoot 2 times a year, day and night. And because sometimes of ammo supply, budget constraints, that can be in the same day. So you'd shoot your firearm once a year, and that's acceptable.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my question. Is it?
Yeah, I really would want someone, if someone is saying, hey, I'm going to protect you and I have the authority to use this gun when I deem necessary, I'd really like police officers to have more funding and more requirements to go to the range. Like, no, you need going to the range often. This needs to be put into your work day or something. Like, it's important that you know how to use your dang gun.
No, as a police officer, what I had to do because of that training standard, I had to pay for my own ammo and train myself.
Pay for your own range membership as well.
Right, I'll go to the police range when I can, and I'll shoot as much as I can. But if I don't train, I'm not being effective.
Right.
You know, and most of the police officers that know me know that I was proficient with a firearm my whole career, and still try to keep proficiency with it.
Well, you used to be a sniper, right?
Right, but so that's pressure. You just don't, it's not like you're a sniper and you're this grand shot and you can shoot anything. This is practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Shooting is a perishable skill. Pickleball is a perishable skill.
Sure.
Name the sport, it's a perishable skill.
I was going to say, imagine a football or a hockey team that only practiced once a year, maybe twice a year.
Right.
Do you feel like that's something, and you might not know this, so do you feel like this is something that's pretty like national across the board when it comes to the like firearms training, like often throughout the year?
Yes, I would think that we're in the South. So there is more of a conservative feeling than there is more of a liberal setting in Charlotte. Okay, generally speaking nowadays, right? As you go to other places in the country, that's not the case.
Right.
And then that leads me into another topic where you have good police officers and you have bad police officers.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying that we have good and bad police officers, but what I'm saying is we have officers that have a misconception of what is right, and then officers that have a knowledge of what is right. And what one of those misconceptions is should every citizen have a firearm? And we have officers that think nobody should have a firearm except for us police. And then you have me that says everybody should have a firearm.
Yeah.
Right? So somebody's got to be wrong there. Right? So my conclusion obviously is going to be that everybody should have a firearm. And I still believe that. I can argue that point. But other officers would say nobody should have a firearm but me. And I'm like, if we do that, we're living in Rome.
So about concealed carry. So I'm going to call out my dad. I'm going to do it. So I told my dad I'm taking a concealed. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, right.
I told my dad I was taking a concealed carry class. And my dad, he's pro Second Amendment, very conservative. And he gave this very odd reaction. And so we got into, a friendly debate about a concealed carry. And I was for a concealed carry and he was not for a concealed carry. And I said, why aren't you for a concealed carry? And he's a Christian, by the way, a strong believer, I would say. And he's like, well, for two reasons. One, you never saw Jesus with a gun, right? That was his first one. I'm sure you might be familiar with some of these arguments.
Yes.
Okay. First, Jesus didn't have a gun. And then he said, secondly, you have these people that take these concealed carry classes and they don't know how to use a gun, which actually that was probably the fairest one that I heard. But so if someone says that to you, what's your response?
Well, one, we're not Jesus. And if Jesus had guns or his disciples had guns, they would have used them.
No, his disciples did have. Well, they didn't have guns, but
they had
Peter had a sword.
Yeah, right. And then for the other question is what if these people are not being taught correctly? Well, that's the state of North Carolina, or our state here, that needs to ensure that the rules and regulations that they've established are being taught. I teach the North Carolina class, or the outline for the North Carolina class, and I'm certified through North Carolina, and they have rules and regulations for me as an instructor, and I go well past those rules because I want a home that's built better than code, and I want to give instruction that's better than what's required.
But do you feel like a lot of other instructors do what you do when you do a concealed carry class? Because you get into it, and I was sympathetic to my dad's point here, where you have this, remember that mall shooter, mall that saved all these people because he had a concealed carry. Right. And I mean, this guy though, impeccable shots. I mean, you don't even need to know much about, that's really good shots. Right. But this guy had a concealed carry. Right. He was practicing at his grandfather's range all the time. And so say that had been any other concealed carry shooter in a crowded space like a mall, and this shooter starts, are they going to have as good of a chance as this guy that's been training longer? Right. Well,
you can only get out of your performance what your training is. And I talked about that earlier. I hinted earlier, when I was in the Army, we trained for war. We trained, when I say we trained for war, nobody trains for war. When I see Fort Benning, Georgia now, and I see them going through airborne school now, and everybody's walking like they're in college, I'm like, but you're not in college. Right? So there has to be the training. That's why you guys came to my class, and I'm not going to brag because I don't need to brag or feel like that. So forgive me if you think I'm bragging, but I'm trying to teach the best I can to equip you to leave my class after just 8 hours, knowing everything that you need to know in 8 hours, that I can squeeze it in there. That makes you to be a smarter, more prepared, educated carrier of a firearm. All across the board, from the mental capacity to the physical capacity to training, practicing, to the laws of North Carolina, to do everything correctly.
You're good.
I know what it was. I unplugged it earlier when I walked past. But
you unplugged
it back in.
That's okay. Okay, because I was kind of curious about that, because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of people that are pro Second Amendment, kind of like passively pro Second Amendment, where they're like, oh, this is cool, but I don't really want to touch it. Where it's like, do we need a society that's more like, yeah, we not only do we have firearms, but we actually know how to use them.
Right. I like Georgia. I like the southern states. But Georgia does not require much training at all before you get your concealed carry permit. And I don't have a necessary problem with that, but then you're not getting the benefits of training. And we need to be educated. A firearm is a dangerous weapon.
Right.
It is a tool, but it's a dangerous weapon. And it needs to have training in order to handle it properly. If not, statistic-wise, the firearm's taken away from you and used against you. And we talked about that, and we talked about ways we can prevent that, and we want to take every advantage of that, not be a statistic, right?
Yeah.
Or you cause an accident,
right? Or shoot yourself.
I find the parallel interesting that police officers are only required to take those shooting, those qualifying shoots twice a year, and they could do it at the same time, and they kind of take the same approach with people getting their concealed carry. I mean, a gun license, you can just go buy it. But to get your concealed carry, you take, most of them are 2 4-hour classes, correct? Yours is a 1 8-hour.
1 8-hour class, yes. And you could do it some people do it in 12-hour classes, and there's all kinds of time periods, but that works for everybody's schedule. It's easier to take a day off than 2 days off.
Yeah.
I find the parallel in just the lack of training that happens there. And kind of my concern with states, I like the idea, but it is a concern with constitutional carry. becoming, I think it's prominent in 20 or 30 some states at this point, but that is a concern that you can just go get a very dangerous tool that could hurt yourself or others, whether you mean to or not. And where are you falling on these states that have gone constitutional carry? Texas went recently. There's a bunch of others.
Mm-hmm. I would support them, but I would say as a state, if I'm saying an elected official, I'd say we support the constitutional carry, but we strongly encourage personal practice, right? Like we've talked about. We all have to practice, or you perform poorly. You get what you practice for.
Sure.
Right? And so none of us want to shoot 10 holes in the paper. We all want to shoot 1 hole in paper, but none of us can, right? Because we don't practice. And if we practice, we probably couldn't do it, right? So we need to practice more, and if we practice more, then we get out of us what we practice. So how much you do.
Do you think the handling of firearms might be better in the U.S. if they had like mandatory military, such as Israel and other countries, where
definitely
you have to go? I think it's 2 years in Israel. I might be wrong on that, so nobody freak out. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I want to say it's right around 2 years, a year or two, and it's men and women that both go and get that type of training. Do you think you would be less concerned about constitutional carry if that was the case?
If there was formal training, yes. Yes. But there has to be formal training somewhere. That's why like military and police can have more access to weapons because they have the alleged training. But there are police officers most police officers are given the choice where you can shoot more often. You just have to do it on your time.
Right.
And there's those that do that, and there's those that don't, obviously, because of time, because of kids, because of family.
And money.
Whatever. And money.
Resources,
yes, yeah. So whatever those reasons are, we all need to take a personal responsibility into how we train. That's what, like I was telling you, there's an 80-20 rule for training. 80% of it is done unloaded in the house, and 20% of it is done on the range. So you should be training 4 times more in your home than outside on the range. If you do that, if you do those whatever dry firing exercises or practice exercises that you're doing, you're going to be a much better shooter. You're going to have much better control and discipline.
Yeah, well, it just seems like common sense. The more you practice, the better you are.
Right,
but
especially like if you play golf.
Oh, I don't play golf. I don't. Listen, I don't even touch it. I played top golf once. Right. My leg just kind of went out like, bing, and
I think mine's more like putt-putt, hit the duck or something.
Yeah, I can do putt-putt.
I feel like golfing is a really good analogy because golfing is one of those things where you get up on the tee and the most minor adjustment you make determines a good shot from a bad shot. And it's just, it absolutely floors me. And it's like, I'm not proficient at golf. I took some classes when I was younger and just enough that I can kind of help people along. Like usually we end up at Topgolf. It's like enough that I can kind of correct their stance and their swing just a little bit to get them shooting better. And it's always just a phenomenon. So it's like, okay, just make sure you don't, drop your shoulders. Make sure you follow through smoothly. And all of a sudden you just have a fantastic swing compared to, balls that you were shanking left or right, or they're rolling off the deck at Topgolf, whatever it might be. And shooting is very similar. It is a finesse. I mean, you're talking about trigger control. And I think you made a point in the class as well that you don't just practice standing up, broad facing a target and shooting, because it is very rare that you're going to be in a position to do something like that.
Right, because you wouldn't want to plan ahead, see trouble coming. We all know what trouble looks like. See it coming and then take precautionary actions to protect yourself, your life. Nobody's designed to receive bullets.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, I guess kind of coming back to practicing, I think there's also too, with firearms, I think there could be potentially a lack of respect for it, where I think when I took your class too, like I told you, I was like, I've never handled a gun before. And I think even the way you taught, like, this is very serious, this can really hurt you if you don't do it right. And so that kind of instilled with me, like, I want to practice. I want to get better because this is a dangerous weapon and I don't want to misuse it because it has the power to do some irreversible things. And some of it will depend on me as well. So
that's where that training comes in, because if I make the right decisions and do the right things in self-defense, then one, I'm protected by the law. I'm not guilty under the law. But if I don't practice and I don't prepare myself for those things, then I'm not preparing to be protected from the law.
Right. And I have to bring it back up because Jordan, I know your dad enough that he will bring up the point that Jesus did tell Peter to put the sword down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I thought of that.
I had a similar discussion with somebody years ago, and kind of went a similar way, but they very much took the route of inaction and being passive, to the point that I was like, okay, you're going to hate me for bringing up a cliche scenario, but somebody breaks into your house, they're threatening to kill you and your wife. It's like, what are you going to do? And he was so abhorrent against any type of violence and taking a life that he's like, I'm going to let them kill me. I was like, and your wife? Like, at some point, I feel like for me, it's like I came into a contradiction, whereas I'm not protecting what God's blessed me with and put me in charge of to not protect them. So
yeah,
if it was just me and that was my mentality, then maybe I would feel better about laying down my life, turning the other cheek at that point. But when it comes to wife, kids, friends, or just other innocent people around, I think that's where the moral conflict starts. And that's where me and him had a sharp disagreement. I was like, I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, and I know my dad's not enough of a beta male to say
I don't
that.
think he is.
No.
I've had this, like, it just reminded me of a similar discussion of very contrasting opinions.
So I told him I made two cases. I made a case that's like, well, if someone, is gonna come into your house, you're gonna grab a knife, you're gonna grab something else to defend yourself, right? And he was like, well, yeah, because he's not a wimp. He's gonna protect his family. So I was like, why can't it be a gun? And I was like, and secondly, I was like, okay, if you're okay with the police officer having a gun to defend your family or you, why aren't you okay with doing it for yourself? And so those were the two. And he actually ended up kind of folding a little bit. He was like, oh, let's not. I never win an argument with my dad. So yeah, no, I did. When you said the thing about Peter, I was like, oh yeah, because Jesus was kind of like, put down your weapons. But he had a very specific agenda of being our savior and going to the cross to die
and foreseeing the future, knowing the future. And he even told his disciples, if I needed to have legions to come down to protect me, I could have done it. Yeah, I could have called the Father, and he would have sent them. We're not Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. No, we're not. And one thing you said during the concealed carry class that I thought was interesting, I never thought of it. It's like, well, this person, they've made this decision to do this thing. That's why you're always in a mode of self-defense. Right. Your action is dependent on what they do.
Right.
So it kind of takes that burden off of you to be like,
when it happens, it happens fast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, if this person is going to choose to try to shoot at me or my family, that's the decision they've made, and they're going to have to reap the consequences. But if I just open fire on someone, that's a completely different story.
Oh, definitely. Right. And you shouldn't do that. I've seen people do that too, and that's wrong. Like we were watching the video, that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we know that, and there'll be ramifications for that. So those are all things we have to worry about and to address and to practice, and then think about our decisions. This is a great way to talk about these things and to realize, what can I do? What should I do? What steps will I take?
Mm-hmm.
It's just about being thoughtful and purposeful.
Right.
There's one more question I wanted to ask you. Well, first, do you want to have the final?
My question will probably come up in like 15 minutes or after the podcast. So
okay.
Ask away.
All right. So to wrap up everything that we've talked about, well, maybe it won't do a good job. We'll find out. But with your experience as a believer, as someone who's been in our military, and we're thankful for you, who's also served our city, and we're thankful for that as well. What is your thought process on young people now, a certain level of ungratefulness about everything? From your perspective, one, do you think it's there, or am I just asking you a leading question? And secondly, if you do think that's there, what is something that can be done to fix that ungratefulness?
Well, life fixes it, because when you're young, you're stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've all been there, right? And so when you get older, you get hopefully smarter if you get older. And then I guess the best thing to do is look at each one of us, where each one of us are instilled with certain gifts and talents, and we use those talents to influence others. And if we come across people that hold a different view, obviously we're going to say something. We're here, we're going to say it publicly. We're here, we're going to say it intentionally, and we're going to say it personally if we have to. And that's where the rubber meets the road.
Mm-hmm.
Personally is maybe where some of these people that are taking for granted things that they have been given or things that they choose to take for granted, and they need to be more responsible,
mm-hmm.
right? More like what I won't even go with those terms that I use, but more responsible, more consistent with what we would like to call a successful member of society,
mm-hmm.
and not a detrimental member of society. Because we need each other. We need a workforce. We need friends. We need family. We need people to be a part of our life. We don't need enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You got anything?
As we're coming to wrap up, now you've said that your classes are getting pretty full, and you're quite busy. You're mostly on Facebook, correct, for social media?
Yes, for social media, mostly Facebook. It's been pretty good social media platform for our business because you really can't market the way we'd want to market with just the concealed carry class.
Okay.
And then word of mouth.
Okay. Word of mouth. And
yes, word of mouth is probably what's kept us alive. We're going on 10 years in business, and I can't believe it. I was thinking 1 year and we'd be done, but 10 years, and I'm like, I'm still in business for this,
mm-hmm.
And I'm not that rich yet.
Now, what did you mean by you can't market on social media the way you might want to?
Well, some platforms like YouTube, I can't put, gun videos on YouTube and get any monetary value from that.
Right.
So there's certain platforms that I cannot use,
mm-hmm.
right? I'd like to give out free information, but usually that's not going to be very received well on some platforms,
mm-hmm.
because if you do anything with guns, Facebook will not let you put any advertisements about weapons or selling weapons or anything like that. It's just when they have approached me before, I tell them all I'm doing is teaching classes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not selling or buying anything or offering anything. All I'm doing is teaching classes. I'm doing instructional things which are good. You want those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they approved my page.
There you
Yay!
go. Got through it. I bring it up because I do have two platforms to suggest to you. One that's running parallel to YouTube is a platform called Rumble.
Okay, I've heard of that.
You can put videos up. They let you monetize it actually right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still growing. And I kind of mentioned earlier, parallel economies seems to be what's happening right now, is that we have businesses like Gillette that make a commercial just completely, I can't think of anything but cuss words right now, but but completely
right.
dumping on men. And so they create that commercial, and it's just like, okay, well, they're taking the feminist route. And then you get Daily Wire's
Jeremy's
Razors comes out. So we're watching these kind of parallel economies come up. Daily Wire is putting out tons of documentaries, and they're doing movies now. Timcast is even they're starting to do music production, and they've got like scary story type podcasts. So we're seeing like a mere, like almost conservative economy start to parallel what became the liberal economy. So I wanted to bring up Rumble for you if you wanted to put those type of video tutorials on there.
Oh, yeah.
And get some type of monetization off of it. The other one, which is pretty new, and we're on it as well, is called Public Square. And Public Square is really based off of the area around you. So it is Charlotte based. That's your newsfeed, is whoever's in your area. It's connected us with quite a few interesting people. Some of them that might even be writing for us in the near future. And it's really connecting a lot of conservatives in the area. So I don't know if you want to fill up more classes, but you would be the only concealed carry class that I've seen on the platform as of yet. So I'd be happy to show that to you afterwards. But
yes, please.
Kind of just making it known for our listeners that there are places that you can go if you feel like you are getting these type of, you've experienced it, getting banned or getting your pages shut down or your social media and whatever it might be. And essentially your voice, which is pretty critical in our country, just want to live in harmony with each other. And, as there are goods and bads to this parallel economy, part of it is that we are just completely separating ourselves, and it's just going to create more of that echo chamber that I mentioned earlier. That being said, I can't blame anybody for not wanting to continue to give their money to companies that hate them, silence them, block them, ban them. We've seen a number of people in the last year, I think, get booted off of platforms for not a lot, to be honest. But yeah, it's something I wanted to make you aware of, and I want to make our listeners aware of where they can find us. But this episode has been an absolute pleasure, Gil. We're very happy to have you out here. Would love to have you out again.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have a bigger space
We
at
can
some
talk about
point.
good things.
Yeah. But this has been a really great episode, really good perspective. We really appreciate you coming out. You guys can check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Facebook. No TikTok though, because we don't like it. But that's it. Tune in next time. Gil, thank you again.
Thank you.